Hello YouTube,
Blood bow.
Today I want to talk about ways I improved my account to get 36 stars in the Spiral Abyss. Wait, if you're watching this video, then you most likely aren't subscribed. If you don't want Eula to seek vengeance for this, then I suggest you subscribe. For a long time I wasn't interested in the difficulty offered by the Abyss. I didn't see the rewards being a good enough incentive for the harder content. Now that I've done all the current content the game has to offer, I've been able to put more effort into getting closer to that coveted 36 stars. With this particular iteration of Spiral Abyss, Overload is a very strong elemental reaction. Monsters like the Perpetual Mechanical Array, Primo Geovishap, and Rune Graders become much more manageable. My first team being an iteration of National Team Official, so kinda like the version with Raiden people use, but not as insane damage. My second team being a 3 Cryo and 1 Hydra team. I came to this team choice since my typical freeze comp struggled with Fuller 12 during the previous phase and wasn't able to beat the Magukenki. This is due to the fact boss monsters can't be frozen or knocked around with Animo, nullifying the core identity of this team, as well as severely lowering the ceiling Mayaka's damage can reach since Blizzard Strayer isn't able to be as optimal. I get how at first glance, this second team doesn't look good. Eula lacks the physical resistance decrease offered by an Electro character via Superconduct, and Shatter is kind of a bad elemental reaction. Luckily, my Rosaria is cracked and able to produce a huge amount of elemental particles for both Eula and Ayaka. Eula's burst makes up for this lack of synergy. Even without it fully charged, it's just enough damage to beat the Spiral Abyss. Just something to note if you're wondering where the majority of my healing comes from, I have an R3 prototype Amber on Mona, so whenever I cast a burst I gain health. Another issue Freeze teams face is in regards to Abyss Heralds and Lectors. Time can quickly be lost when they are frozen before they transition into the next combat phase where they cast their elemental shield. There are some important mechanics to keep in mind whenever the Spiral Abyss has these certain monsters. The Pyro Abyss Lector has an ability that brands your party and acts pretty much like corrosion. From what I can tell, if you iframe, but the Lector has already cast an ability and it hits you, the brand is still applied. With Perpetual Mechanical Array, during combat it will enter the Absolute Defense state, where it separates into Rune Sentinels. To save time, look for the one with gold runes around the bottom, and when it gains a health pool, burst it down. With the Primo Geovishap, don't waste your skills or burst at the very start, except for elemental particles from your skill. There's a small transition period before the monster enters combat where it takes reduced damage, so that's why I recommend not wasting anything. Something you can do to increase your damage is to gain a shield from the elemental shard drop during the crystallize reaction. The Primo Geovishap will unleash an attack called Primordial Shower, and the monster will take damage if you have a shield. On the first half of Chamber 3, I recommend after starting the challenge to cut to either the left or the right monster and let the second one come to you. The reason I say to do this is that after defeating the first 2 opponents, the Rune Graders spawn, and you should be able to be on top of one of them and continue your damage without repositioning. With the Magukenki at the start of combat, he will be invulnerable, so again don't waste necessary abilities except skills if you need the particles to cast any burst. This is one of the more difficult fights in the game since Magukenki has multiple interactions that you'll need to reposition for. For the Primo Geovishap and Magukenki in particular, iframes are incredibly important for avoiding one-shot attacks. This can be done with almost every burst in the game. It makes your character fully invulnerable to incoming damage. If you're really good, there's such thing as dash iframes, but I'll stick with just recommending the ones from bursts. So far I haven't really said anything bad about the Spiral Abyss, but let's take a moment to be a bit critical of it. First thing that is a drawback for much of the player base is the Chamber and Star bounties. For the amount of effort invested to learn gameplay mechanics, leveling characters, weapons, and artifacts, what you get in return isn't even close to being considered a diminishing return. I mean, obviously this is a gacha game, so it incentivizes you to spend, which could be an issue for some players if they feel like they fell behind the curve for Spiral Abyss, or they never even caught up to that point. That's why meta has a very mixed feeling in the community, and some characters are easier to invest in than those with the quote-unquote bad characters or weapons can have some negative feelings since they feel like they just had to put so much more time in. Genshin doesn't do a good job of explaining how mechanics work and damage scales, so either through trial or error or finding a guide that already did the heavy lifting is all we can rely on. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. Learning how to actually play the game is rewarding in some cases. The issue is for very casual players outside of the Spiral Abyss in the overworld. The more casual will become confused as the game progresses. As more regions are introduced and the average AR becomes higher, we should be able to expect more variance in combat interactions and I guess a general harder difficult game. Just quickly, we'll talk about the quote-unquote meta teams overall for Spiral Abyss. Generally, the strongest teams utilize one of three elemental resonances. Double Cryo for 15% crit rate, Double Pyro for 25% attack, and Double Geo for 15% damage increase and a 20% reduced geo resistance. These teams take advantage of strong elemental reactions for damage. Like Melt and Vaporize, which both have a 2x multiplier, which means double the damage. Freeze is really strong since you don't have to worry about the chamber mechanics. You also gain 40% crit chance from Blizzard Strayer when units are frozen, alongside an elemental resistance decrease with Viridescent. Geo pushes hypercarry ceilings to the roof, and the shields make you worry less about avoiding damage and more about pumping damage. Now let's talk about things you can do in Genshin to improve damage. There are three main focuses in your control for improving a character's damage. If you spend money, constellations are a fourth, but let's just focus on these three. Talents. With level up books, you can increase a talent level by 1 and up to 10. Talents are locked behind ascension phases, which require you to level up your character and get boss monster mats. Weapons. Enhancing these costs ore and mora. Ascending weapons is the rough part. Unlike talent books, you'll need to craft 5-star weapon mats towards the end. Of course, getting 5-star weapons isn't something to bet on, but lots of 4 stars can be good to invest resources into. Artifacts. Easy to get, but difficult to get good ones with the stats you want. The thing is, even only with average and below average artifacts, you can still output the needed damage. One of the most important things about artifacts is the set bonuses. Things like 4-piece Blizzard Strayer and Severed Fate can really boost damage. Millilith and Noblesse are solid supporting buffs. When it came to my Spiral Abyss journey, I found that I was investing lots of resin into hunting good artifacts, when I could have just been getting my talents up as well as improving my weapons. For a long time I only had 3 weapons at level 80 plus, and once I got them higher, characters felt a lot stronger. Since Spiral Abyss is the most consistent difficult content we have in Genshin, there's a lot to learn about the game to perform better, not just grinding out in-game improvements. I started to watch a lot of theory crafters in the community, which taught me a lot. I hope you've enjoyed this video where I talk about some tips on how to beat certain bosses in the Spiral Abyss, as well as improving your characters. This was the first time I got all 36 stars, and the background footage was also my first 36 stars without having to reset or redo the challenge for certain floors. If you like this video, it really helps to like it. If you want to see more Genshin related content from me in the future, subscribe.
まだやり残したことが。